All right, thanks for joining us today. I'm Colt Paris, Realtor in Cheyenne.
I'm Chris Edwards with Legacy Lending Group in Cheyenne.
Nina Wodrowski with Bear Forestry.
We brought Nina in today to talk about trees, her favorite topic.
So an arborist is that's a very broad term for someone who works on individual trees, usually one at a time or multiples of them in somebody's residential setting. They do a variety of things. There's arborists who exclusively work on tree removal if the tree is hazardous or old and dying.
So like the people that trim trees in the old neighborhoods, make sure they don't fall onto the roadways and stuff.
Yeah. An arborist also is it can be known as a tree surgeon, someone who is performing technical work to take care of trees in a variety of ways. That can mean pruning trees. That can mean cabling them so they're more secure if there's other defects or structural issues with the trees. An arborist can be someone who is caring for the tree's health in a more physiological and biological sense. They can they're someone who works with the soil and really they see the tree as a living organism.
Okay. So a little bit of a loaded question for a homeowner looking at their yard, wondering if they should plant trees, or somebody looking to buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
And a yard full of trees versus a yard that has no trees. What's the value of a tree?
There's a lot of ways. Yeah, like you addressed, it is a loaded question because there's not one way to answer it. But the value of having trees on the property, I think is pretty significant because as an arborist that is routinely showing up to meet with homeowners and other landowners that I often hear, I bought this house for the trees. Trees are really good for people's mental health and cognitive health. They make people happy. There's a spiritual component to having trees. It kind of brings nature a little bit closer. It breaks up a lot of the hard lines in the urban or semi-urban environment, and really just softens the look of everything. So I would say trees have a very high emotional component too. There's a lot of people who love birds or wildlife or nature that are using trees, nesting in trees, roosting. A lot of pollinators visit trees, even if there's not.
So we're talking
flowers.
more about like the curb appeal. We're talking about bringing nature a little bit closer.
Mm-hmm.
There's no like hard value, but something looking good is of course better than something not looking good.
I think so. I think a lot of people, first impressions do carry a lot of weight.
You mentioned earlier, the shade trees.
Oh, yeah.
The value of having those there and reduced heating costs even.
Oh, yeah. What's really interesting here, in our high elevation, we're very exposed to the sun. Even with our wind, we can still have 95 or 100-degree days. I mean, not that they're all that common, but
AC's not all that common in Cheyenne. It's not seen as a necessity or anything.
It's less common than you would think,
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. I've had some encounters with people here in town that have shade trees and even some conifers on the south and west sides of their homes who never turn on their AC or have no reason to install an AC unit altogether. So in fact, I think there's a substantial value that a tree can provide in energy savings. Even. And that's obvious, the shade can cool a house, but also on the flip side, in the wintertime, having a dense tree on the south or even the west side of the house where a lot of our predominant wind is coming from, those trees kind of act as a buffer, and they can even hold a little bit of heat closer to the house.
Really?
Yeah. So
I've seen people try and do that with wind breaks, especially when they have a lot of property. They put the big fences out there.
Mm-hmm.
And trees are acting kind of the same.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And in the case of more of a traditional windbreak, those trees are trying to break up the wind. They're not as set close to the house where they're kind of buffering the house with a little bit of heat or.
So
Those
the ones
go
closer.
outside
But
around the fence line of your property.
they do break the wind so that it's not as
A very
loud.
large, we have a lot of
you know,
cottonwoods here in Cheyenne, Wyoming. It makes up the biggest component of our urban forest, and that particular tree can be known to transpire thousands of gallons of water in a day on a hot summer day with optimal resources. Probably less, this time of year in the winter. The tree is dormant, but it's not dead. It's still, the roots are active, and there's a need for the water in the soil just to complete certain metabolic functions and everything. So yeah.
I grew up with a cottonwood in my backyard. It was massive, but the roots were everywhere. They infected our pipes, infected our sewer lines, everything. Do all trees do that?
It's a great question that we're answering here in Cheyenne because we have so many cottonwoods. They're the largest component of our urban forest here, and a lot of people have the same experience with cottonwoods that the root system is extremely pervasive, and they're fast growing, vigorous trees, and they're always on the hunt for water. And so you can better believe that their roots are going to go long and far, and sometimes twice the span of their canopy, just to tap
however
into
tall
water.
they are, or is how wide?
Oh, how wide their canopy is. Most tree roots usually go to about the drip line, but in certain very water-loving species or trees that are very thirsty, need to have their roots soaked, they are going to go long and far for the water they need to survive. So that's why you can find the tree roots absolutely everywhere. Tree roots can start as very micro filaments that are moving through the soil, and those very fine roots are at the very tips of the tree that are doing all of they're mining through the soil, because the tree roots can't really just plow right through the soil. They need to slowly
build a path.
plow their way through, or kind of open up their way through. And so in small cracks, they can start to meander and get into those pipes.
Now, if they reach the pipes, if they're searching for water and they reach the pipes, does it stop at the pipes and kind of turn towards the water? Like, if it's in a sewer, is it going to come? Can it come up towards your sewer and start coming in, or is it going to go through it and go?
My educated guess would be that the tree roots are probably going to take the path of least resistance, so they'll probably go with the water flow away from.
And they just absorb that water and pull it back.
Something you said earlier, I forgot I didn't answer a part of your question, but you asked if all tree roots are pretty extensive like the cottonwood, and I would say no. It's we don't have too many species here that are on the hunt for water because this is a semi-arid environment here. Our ecoregion is the high plains grassland, which puts us with minimal rainfall, not quite the desert, but enough to still be semi-arid. And even in our ecoregion here, we really are only finding cottonwoods or aspen and willows, all the trees that really need a lot of water, along riparian areas in nature. We're finding them.
What's riparian?
A riparian area is a stream or a river with a little bit of a floodbank too. So it's just a wet area, and
So it's where you find cattails and reeds and stuff. That would be where the willows and the cottonwoods, they would go there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they do.
What trees would you grow here that have the best chance?
We have very slim pickings, and in fact, if I'm thinking that we have just about maybe 15 or 16 different species of trees that do well, and so I kind of base that, how I consult with people or what tree I would be inclined to recommend based on somebody's situation. You know, what are they looking for? Are they looking for certain characteristics? Do they like, you know, smaller trees that are adding a lot of aesthetic value, that are flowering or attracting pollinators, or you know, or a tree that's providing some kind of function for a windbreak or shade? So my answer really varies all the time. But if I had to choose a couple of my favorite trees to recommend growing here, I really like the hawthorn tree. I think it's a very underutilized tree in our landscape here.
I'll put a picture of the hawthorn tree up for people.
And the hawthorn tree is very hardy. It doesn't take nearly as much water as some of the other trees, so it makes it. This is probably our most drought hardy tree, and they don't get super large. So it's something that you can fit into a small yard, or even in a larger yard, is, you know, kind of mixed in with other trees. They flower, and there are probably a good four to five different cultivars of the hawthorn tree that actually thrive and do well here in Cheyenne. You know, if you're looking for a shade tree that isn't as large or as high maintenance as a cottonwood, I like a couple different ones. I like honey locust trees because they.
Sounds cool.
The honey locust, yeah. Have you seen one?
I haven't seen. I have no idea, just based off the name.
I think you probably have seen one, but maybe you just didn't know what you were looking at. Why I like it so much is that it's a very symmetrical tree. So I think they even out in somebody's landscape. If you wanted to, you know, frame the driveway or the front walkway with two, they're going to grow very evenly together, and so they look, you know, they end up looking very nice. And they're not difficult trees to maintain. They have very hard wood, so they're a little bit slower growing, but they are hardy and they do very well here.
So in your kind of role as an arborist, would you, if somebody called you up and said, hey, I want to know what trees to plant here, come out and do a consultation with me, with my landscaper, or, you know, with me, you would be able to suggest things like that?
Yeah, I would like to take the time to kind of get to know what somebody's looking to do. What is their long-term plan for their landscape? Are they looking for shade? Are we working with, they want a certain flower? Do they like different characteristics of the bark, or they like how certain leaves look? You know, how much maintenance are they willing to do? And, you know, and so kind of going through a series of questions to kind of, you know, guide somebody through that and getting the information I would need, then I could make some recommendations for trees.
So do you ever package anything like that together? Of like, you know, kind of meeting with some homeowners before they're gonna do their yard and say, hey, what kind of wood do you like? What kind? Because that sounds great for a lot of people as an option to offer them, as, you know, with some bushes or however that goes, right? Because
Especially
you guys,
people that are building.
yeah, if you're building a house, I mean, you can offer opportunity to go meet with them and walk with them in their landscaper and say, hey, maybe you throw up a couple trees here if you wanted that, and this is the trees I'd recommend, and kind of work together with something like that.
I, you know, if I were to, you know, consult with someone, I would like to do it when they're pretty sure, when they're committed to their building design and they know whether or not they're going to have some other concrete features that go into their property. Because I'm trying to avoid impacting the tree later on, because this wasn't known ahead of time.
Yeah, and that's
So-
a big investment. Time-wise, especially. You don't plant a tree so you can enjoy it. You plant to save your grandkids.
Yeah, I think there's a quote out there that the best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago, and so, you know,
Yeah,
'cause
that's why everyone loves cottonwoods. You'll see it within your lifetime.
And it is, you know, the thing about the cottonwoods here, especially down Pershing and in the avenues and south of Pershing, that's where most of our cottonwoods exist. We're beginning to lose the large cottonwoods.
You start to see more of the stumps surfing.
Yeah. And
Do you remove stumps in your position?
So yes, I do stump grinding as part of my tree services. More often than not, when I'm removing a tree, most people do want the stump gone. There's times that people don't. But it's required if the tree is in the boulevard. So if the tree is considered a public tree, but it is still the private homeowner's responsibility to maintain that tree, and the city does require those stumps to also be ground out at the time of tree removal. However, the city can't always keep up with absolutely everything, so there might be stumps that you come across that were missed in inspections.
Or haven't been done yet.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I have a couple of stumps that are quite literally poking out of my foundation.
Oh.
Like, here's the wall. This tree stump is right here. How do you take care of that? Would you still be able to grind that out?
That's a great question.
I removed a stump myself once, and I dug around it, and then I lit it on fire.
Oh.
I made dinner off of it. It was fine. Real redneck.
But answering your question about removing a stump, so particularly one that's up against a foundation or maybe the sidewalk or the driveway or something. I own a stump grinder, and that's it's a tracked machine that is that has kind of a rotating spinning head on the end of it that you kind of move back and forth like this and drop a little lower and little lower.
So like big sandpaper wheel almost?
Not quite sandpaper. There's
It has
there's
more teeth on it that like a backhoe does, and it grabs into it and creates all those little.
Oh, like a
Yeah.
wine chainsaw.
and it's almost
Yep.
shredding parts. Yeah, it's like shredding or grinding parts of the.
That sounds
the
dangerous
stump.
to get too close to a foundation.
Yeah, it can be. And so if I'm ever doing a stump grinding, I don't approach the building or the concrete fixture head on. I like to come to it on the side because it's really difficult to look over the edge of the machine and to see just how far out your grinding wheel or the grinding head is reaching, and you might accidentally take a piece out of the foundation.
Yeah.
And start to weaken your foundation if you hit it over and over again, or make a crack. And
That's the worst thing that can happen to a house.
Yeah.
Aside from
Absolutely.
meteorite.
right,
Yeah,
and
right.
people's homes are usually their biggest investment aside from children.
It's the biggest purchase most people will ever make.
So it's
Yeah.
it's important to take to know the extent of the machine or the limitations of the machine. So how I do it, with something that you need to be careful of, I like to approach it on the side, because then I can see just how far the grinding wheel is, and I like to leave at least 3 inches worth, so I have a little bit of wiggle room, so I'm not too close to the foundation. But you can get pretty
Had to
close.
So
And another thing.
I did a bad thing with the birch tree in my front yard. It's not in my yard, it's like on the street, and it had a branch hanging off of the street. City says, cut the branch off. I took my hatchet out there and I cut the branch off. And now that tree is done. Can I bring that back from the brink somehow, or is that wound just too much?
Over the entire canopy of the tree, how much percentage was that one branch that you took out?
Probably only 10%. Not more than that.
So the overall percentage when I'm pruning a vigorous tree, kind of either early in its life or even in its midlife, where it's still really focused on achieving its maximum size, I'm never pruning more than about 20% of the tree in one season. So the percentage of that one branch being 10% doesn't strike me as an amount to remove that was removed that would have caused inherent harm. But with a birch tree, they are susceptible to a fungal infection or maybe some kind of bacterial infection. My educated guess is that maybe the tree acquired something, a spore or some kind of bacterial strain.
I would never have thought about that. I mean, on an animal, when they have an open wound, they're going to get an infection, period. Is it the same with a tree? Is it a guarantee?
No, it's not a guarantee. Sometimes there's a better time of year to prune certain trees than others. Usually the winter tends to be a very safe time for all trees to get pruned, and particularly the only right time in my mind for some other trees.
So if you have to prune a tree on your own, take a branch off, do anything, the winter is the best time.
Yes, and this kind of leads me into thinking about something else. As an arborist, and as I've become more experienced in what I'm doing, one thing that I really try to do is I try to minimize the size of the cuts I have to make on a tree, because the smaller the cut, the smaller the overall surface area, and the quicker the tree can heal up that wound. Larger wounds take, sometimes a decade or more sometimes to heal, to develop all that new tissues and callus to seal over that wound, which prevents insects, pathogens, and rot and decay in the tree. So as I'm become more experienced, I like to make smaller pruning cuts on trees earlier in the tree's life to avoid these potential issues that can come from taking a larger cut that can be invasive to the tree and detrimental in some ways, like the birch tree. And that kind of puts an emphasis on routine tree care, because most of the time, a lot of times people are coming across a tree when it's become some kind of issue. And so investing in the care of your trees very early on in the tree's life can prevent some things. And I also describe tree pruning as almost like real life bonsaiing too, because we're manipulating the growth of the tree, maybe to avoid the house or growing too low into the street for some reasons. And so having an understanding of how trees grow and how trees respond to a pruning cut, and knowing how to influence the integrity of the tree becomes really important as an arborist. Something that you made me think about with, how I really don't like cutting down live trees. I've mentioned that before in the MLS meetings,
Exactly.
where I've met you guys. But the best time to remove a tree is when someone is absolutely certain that this tree is dying and on its way out, before the tree becomes so dead that it now becomes a hazard to remove, because climbing dead trees, by this point the wood is a heck of a lot weaker, and by the time I'm chipping up this tree, it's extremely fine dust that is hard to clean up at the end of the day or the end of the job, and it is very fine, so it does get in
The filters on AC units and any sort of intakes on vehicles.
Yeah.
Sawdust sucks and it goes out.
Mhm.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point to make.
Kind of to jump off of that, when should you remove a tree? Like,
Oh.
what are the problems that are so large with a tree that you just need to get it out?
I like to do kind of a pretty thorough evaluation before I just say, yep, remove the tree, unless if it's over 50% dead. Oh, and this might answer your question too with the birch tree that I didn't get to earlier about, is there a way to bring your tree back? I would say by the time you are noticing decline in over 50% of the tree, just cut your losses, accept the inevitable, because we can't bring this tree back. Going back to the birch tree or somebody else's tree that is just starting to decline, before I would recommend removing the tree, I would want to take a really hard look, and if we get a very accurate and pretty confident diagnosis in the tree, I would say if it's something that we can reasonably fight off, let's go for it. Let's make the concession to give the tree its best chance. And I've been able to preserve trees like that. And there's still on the occasion, I still fight hard for the tree and do what I can to help it thrive. But we still end up losing it anyways. There are certain things that are a little hard to detect, especially when it comes to insects. Trees are very slow to express the things that happen to them.
What do you actually do to kind of help this tree?
Totally depends. I think if there's some very uniform tip dieback, or on a deciduous tree where the leaves are kind of starting to curl back, that's usually a sign. Usually, not always, but usually a sign that the tree is lacking in water. mulch on top of the soil and around the drip line of the tree starts to hold in more moisture for
The drip line
10
is just
times
like
longer.
the edge of the canopy.
Yeah, the very edge of the canopy. And, you know, kind of stemming off of a question you asked earlier of, you know, where do the tree roots go? And, you know, do all trees have, you know, roots like the cottonwood that are just going everywhere? You know, most trees have roots to at least the drip line and sometimes further. But it's a really good start to mulch at least up until the drip line with the tree. And I like to get the trees, you know, a substantial amount of mulch, to a very generous amount, at least 3 or 4 inches.
Okay, so would like grass clippings work? Just like dumping out what you haul up from the grass?
Or the grass itself, even, because I see a lot of trees around here that they just have it planted directly in the yard, right? There's nothing around it. Is it better to have that mulch than your green grass?
No, I wouldn't recommend grass clippings. While they could be great to add more nitrogen to the tree, they're not really going to work in the same way that a dense layer of, you know, hardwood or even some conifer mulch is still good. That is still going to allow a little bit of oxygen and air to permeate, because we don't want to suppress the, not quite like a blanket effect that doesn't really allow the good air exchange between the soil and the atmosphere, because everything underground is still alive. It's breathing. It does breathe underground in that sense that things are moving. There's a lot of metabolic gas exchange, chemical reactions of the soil, and so understanding that there needs to be that fluctuation of air. So we don't want to suppress it entirely, but we do want to get a lot of moisture to be trapped underneath the soil long enough for the trees to have a better chance of absorbing it. So our alkaline soils are higher in pH, and sometimes in the higher pH there's restricted nutrients, and so that's where we can find nutrient deficiencies in some trees because of our higher pH. And so to add something that's a little more acidic, such as, you know, chips that came from a spruce or a pine or a fir tree, can add just a little bit more without going overkill, can add a little bit more acidity to the soil and kind of help just neutralize the soil a little bit, and that gives the tree a better nutrient profile. I have really appreciated your guys' thoughtfulness and all the questions and experience and personal stories here today, and this has been really a great experience.
Thank you for coming in. We appreciate you bringing all your, you know, professional experience, your ideas, your recommendations. Most people don't know how to deal with trees, myself included.
Absolutely.
And yeah, we appreciate you coming in.
Aw,
Yeah, thank you so much.
Can we get
today.
the name of your business and who you
Sure.
are one more time?
Sure. My name is Nina Wodrowski, and my company, I named it Bear Forestry after one of my dogs. So
That is
Bear?
very cool.
Bear Forestry, yep.
Awesome. And we'll
Yeah.
have all the links in the description below, so
Oh, cool.
people can reach out to you.
Sure.
And
Thank
I'm
you.
Cole Paris with Keller Williams Realty.
And I'm Chris Edwards with Legacy Lending Group, NMLS 2705100.
I don't have the links.
Yeah, I have to put it in there.
All right.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you guys so much. This was so much fun.
Yeah, that was a good time.
I